go ahead and start with my presentation.
Well, on day one, as was mentioned in the uh, workshop brief, we covered few Rhino commands to sort of mimic various elements of
Mhm.
Indian temples. And on day two, which was yesterday, we covered the basics of Grasshopper, and we worked on various combinations of shrines, and we worked on fractals, through which the exercise that we did yesterday was to sort of generate and iterate various mandapa layouts. Um, I believe along with this, probably tomorrow, an exercise on a wholesome 3D and an exercise on various types of columns would be kind of sufficient to equip uh, our friends here to go ahead and start designing on their own on the design charade that we decided to have. So yeah, that would be the brief summary of what we are up to, what we have been up to in
Mhm.
the last 2 days.
Cool, awesome. So I will just go ahead and get started. I have put on a screen share here. Let's see if it works. All right, I guess it's doing fine. You guys can see my um, slide, right? All right. So hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Uh, okay, do I have a chat message? All right, yeah, okay. Um, Again, good morning from my side of the world. It might be afternoon for some of you. It might be evening for many of you. I am Shaumo. I am a doctoral candidate in architecture at the University of Illinois. I also have an urban design and architecture degree from India. Um, so I think the parametricism in Indian temples, it's a really exciting. And as I mentioned on day one, it's also a very experimental workshop. And although there has been some research about understanding the geometric logic in Indian temple forms, I guess I have not really seen a workshop dedicated to this particular exercise of somehow I would like to call it in a way, understanding the past, quote unquote. It's a problematic word, but understanding the past through tools of the present. And given that's the purpose of the workshop, to educate people more about and learn with each other through experiments and coding and using Rhino and Grasshopper platforms to understand the Indian temples, my presentation here today is basically a very introductory discussion of Indian temple typologies. And when I say introduction, I really mean it because Indian temples, especially since antiquity is a huge subject, and it's a really elaborate and complicated subject. And also, I must mention, it is not my primary research area. So I am kind of returning to Indian temples as I was preparing to make this presentation to you and present it. So it's a very brief introduction to temple typologies with the purpose of telling you folks about how and what kinds of Indian temple forms we are looking at, and hopefully you will find something that will inspire you to go ahead and explore them through design iterations and using Rhino and Grasshopper. So I guess the main purpose here is to enhance your skills in parametric softwares, but also an opportunity to learn a bit about Indian temples in a very new way. So I will just go ahead and get started with my presentation. I guess some more people are joining in today. Um, so, all right. Yeah.
Shoma,
Yeah.
sorry to cut in
No,
for a
no, no, go
bit.
ahead. Yeah.
Uh, could you share how you want the interaction to be structured? Do you want them to note down their questions and sort of get to them later, or while you go through the slides, do you want
I
them to? Yeah.
I think I'm okay with either. I mean, if you have I would suggest that if you can take screenshots or you can take down notes, you can also do sketches if you like while I go through the presentation. There are two parts of this presentation. So after the first part, we will have a small discussion come a break. So I'll take a probably a 5 minutes breather and then also come back to answer questions if you have some. Also, if you want to interrupt and ask a question, put something in the chat box. I guess Joy can look at it. I don't know how to turn on the chat box while presenting. Um, and if you feel I'm going too fast or too slow, and if you feel like you can't understand something at all, it doesn't make sense to you anyways, then please interrupt, unmute yourself, and ask me to stop and repeat and have a discussion. Is that okay?
Yes,
Uh,
it's okay.
all right. Good. We have more folks joining in, but I'll just get started. So to begin with, I must say that we are interested in the formalist history of temples in India. And by which I mean that we are mostly interested in the forms of its plan forms, its superstructures, and maybe also its ornamentations and materiality and construction techniques. The formalist history of architecture is a really old method of understanding history of architecture by studying its form, or even art history, studying forms of different art. So we are not really going into, by which I mean that if we are doing formalist history, which is very relevant and pertinent to this workshop, we're also not doing social or political or any other forms of cultural understanding of temples. But we must keep in mind that even to start discussing those, we need to understand the formalist aspect if we position ourselves as architects. So very simply, to get started with, a temple, also known as mandir in many Indian languages, it's basically a house or residence of God. It's really uh, it literally means that it's a house of God, or that's the architectural idea of understanding a temple. It's so I emphasize it again by saying that it's not only a place of worship or offering prayers, but God resides in a temple. Now, of course, I am by no means suggesting that God does not reside in other houses of worship, like a church or a mosque or a synagogue or atashveras or something else. But this residing of the god is both part of Indian temple as an architectural form, and also cultures and spatial practices around the temples, which is why the architecture of the Indian temple, it emerges out of different house types. House types that pre-existed the temples gets kind of appropriated and interpreted through the design of Indian temple architecture. From smaller ADQ-like structures, from smaller shrines, which were mostly made of wood, not existing today anymore, Indian temples evolve into larger complex forms. Either they become rock-cut temples, we will see some examples, or they become stone masonry temples. And in some cases, they also have a mixture of stone and brick. Uh, so that is to use the word evolve, we must also be very careful, because it's not really a linear evolution. Like Indian temple was a simpler edicule structure, and then it became larger, complex architecture. It's a very long, non-linear way of understanding the word evolution. It's also a multi-dimensional history. It varies across geographies, it varies across patronages and time periods and construction techniques and many other factors that go into the making. So briefly again, we must remember that the idea of a temple is the residence of God, and God in most of the Hindu culture is almost like a human being, which means that that person has a face, it has a human-like form, it needs a residence to reside in, it has relationships with other gods and goddesses, and there are movements and there are cultural practices around those movements. And going into the in-laws and coming from back from the in-laws of the gods. Like if you are following the this is the time of Rath Yatra, you will find that the Jagannatha from Puri's temple, it has a movement. So it's almost like a human being who has basically needs a house to live in. So we before we go into the details of the temple architecture, it's important to know some terminologies. Now I listed some of them. I got them from a book where there are like few hundreds of terminologies, and definitely we are not delving into much details here, but some basic terminologies are important to understand the spaces that are in the temple architectures, which we will see. So the first term is Garbha Griha, which is the womb house, or which literally translates to womb house, and it also is the sanctum or the holy shrine. And this is perhaps the most important part of the temple, on which the superstructure. Some of you did some design iterations in the earlier 2 days. We looked at the superstructure above the Garbha Griha, right? So that one is the first term. The second term is mandapa, which is the space of the worshipper, which is the hall, or typically the hall for prayer or worship, which is associated or adjacent to the Garbhagriha, mostly in front of it. Now, not all temples have mandapas, but most temples do. Some temples only have the holy shrine, which are the earlier, more simpler forms of structure. But later in time, we have evolution of not only one mandapa, but many mandapas from different types of functions. So that is mandapa. It's the hall for worshippers, where people worship the god in the Garbhagriha. Then we have the most important term is perhaps the Vimana and Vimanam, or Vimanam and Shikhara. So the Vimana is the main body of the temple, which is the spire above the Garbhagriha, which is the most identifiable thing in an urban context. When you look at a temple, it has like a spiral-like structure. And the word Vimana is mostly used in the South Indian context. Word Shikara is typically used in the North Indian context, but it is important to keep in mind that there is a dome-shaped crowning on the top of the South Indian temples, which is also known as Vimana, which is also known as Shikara. So sometimes when we see North Indian temples, we will see the main spire being marked as Shikara, and sometimes in South Indian temples, we will see the main spire or the main superstructure is marked as Vimana, while the top crowning is marked as Shikhara. So just to make sure that, um, so uh, just to make sure that there are many usages of these terms, and there's not really a comprehensive standardization, but these mostly work. Then there is the very important word kuta, which is the square radiculus, pyramid, or miniature shrine, which gets placed on the vimanas and the shikaras, and help us understand the incremental nature of how the geometry of Indian temples evolve, and how one gets added to the other, or one emanates from the other and becomes smaller in shape and size, and why that progression is important also from a parametric perspective. Then there is the prakara, or the enclosure wall, which we will find in most larger temple complexes. Now, there is another word, mandala, which many of you might be familiar with. I just mentioned it here because mandala is different from mandapa. So mandala is basically a geometric representation of the universe in the Buddhist and Hindu cultures. So we will remember them very briefly. Garbhagriha, the womb house; Mandapa, the hall for worship; Vimana, the main body of the temple, the spire, the superstructure in South Indian context. The Shikhara is the same for the North Indian context. Kuta, square edicula, and Prakara, the enclosure wall. moving forward, the one of the most famous and well-known historians, architectural historians who have studied Indian temples quite extensively is Adam Hardy, and I will talk about him more. Uh, these are his sketches. So his understanding of how the form of Indian temple came into being is the argument that there were wooden prototypes of which became monumental shrines later. So these are the five basic wooden prototypes which we should pay attention to understand the geometries and unfold its complexities once we look at the more complex pictures later. So as you can see, these are very simple wooden structures, and by these sketches, you can see some elements of it are very symbolic in nature, and some elements are quite functional. So it is the earlier prototype form. It's like the proto design. It's like the sketch that is happening, right? So that's Adam Hardy's sketches, which are quite illustrative of these prototypes. So early influences, we do not see these wooden prototypes anymore today because they have ceased to exist in the course of time. But we do see them in some rock cut temples and caves. In this is from Ajanta. As you can see, if you look at the second and the third shape, the B and the C, you will find them here in a rock cut temple. And if you notice closely, you will find that these structures, these linear support structures, they are not really required when you are making a rock cut temple, but they are the reminiscent of a wooden structure. So basically, the material has changed to rock, or rather, the construction technique has changed to rock cut, but there are traces of wooden structures in these temples. All right. And you can also see a kind of geometric understanding of space is also kind of evolving. You have five, one main, and then three here, three here. There's a symmetry, there's an arch, there are three equidistant foyers here. Then there is the Chaitahal, which is a Buddhist place of worship in a monastery typically, which is also completely rock cut. So this internal space is carved out of a single piece of rock. And there you have a kind of a depth of space. And also the most important part is to have a circumambulatory path of worship. Now, when we understand geometry of most worship spaces, like if you have looked at a church or if you have looked at a mosque, we have a relationship between the worshipper and the worshipped. So there is the God and then there is the worshipper. And then there's the concept of circumambulating the worshipped by the worshipper, which gets translated into the spatial layout of Chaitahals. And you will see how these spaces later influence Indian temple spaces. And then there is the the world heritage of the Sanchi Stupa. It's basically a heap of which is basically a circular sorry a domical heap of bricks, which is also solid, and it has a circumambulatory path all around it. And these are fence-like structures, which also take their articulations or their forms from earlier fence-like structures, which were mostly visible uh, um, in wooden construction techniques, right? So we keep this in mind and try to not only understand we are more interested in you identifying the forms and the shapes rather than going into the much details of like one of these each pictures can become a lecture. So I'm just briefly running through them. Now, I guess we already know this, but I will mention this once more that there are four basic plan forms of temples. No matter which Indian temple you look at, it will fall in either of these four basic shapes. It can also be a combination because you might find larger temple structures where there are multiple plan forms. The most basic is the square, and I am sure you did some experiments on the square form earlier. Then there is the rectangular. Then there's the circular, which is quite rare, but there are some circular temples. And then there's the apsidal, which is perhaps more frequent than the circular, nevertheless lesser frequent than the square and the rectangular. The apsidal is basically a rectangle with a semicircle in the end. The most frequent of these plan forms are the square and the rectangular plans of temples. Now, of course, these are not always, they don't have to be this much simple always. They can also be a bit more complex. So it's basically, let's say this temple, which is a Deoghar, in Deoghar, it's a Gupta temple. It's it is basically a square, but then you see how that square has been, growing all around it, maintaining the squarishness at the same time, also having a really interesting edge and a boundary like pattern over here, which I guess is of interest when you want to go from here on the left, the square, to here through your software platforms, or understand the how that is basically multiple squares overlapping, shifting, cutting across each other. Then of course there's the rectangular temple, which can also have these many corners and edges folding and unfolding and breaking up into smaller segments and articulating the form. The circular can also, we will also call these temples as circular, although this might appear to you as rectangular from the front. And also the apsidal form, which becomes more and more enunciated with uh, you know um, with colonnades all around them. So I'm just curious. So far, so good. Everyone is following me. Am I going too fast, too slow? Just give me a.
You're good. Very much following you. It's going great.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Cool. Awesome. All right. Now we want to so we only covered the basic terminologies and the basic plan form so far. So now we are interested in the stylistic typologies. Now, when I say stylistic typologies, it is very important to understand what we mean by them. So there are two basic larger categories of these two styles, which is the Dravida or the South Indian style of temples, and then there's the Nagara or the North Indian style of temples. Earlier historians have uh, identified the Nagara style as Indo-Aryan style, but that's quite a quaint terminology, as it has kind of an ethno-racial vibe to it. So if you look at earlier historians' history texts, in some presentations, you might find the use of the word Indo-Aryan, which identifies the Nagara, but I have not used it following Adam Hardy, who also recommends not using that term. And then there's the Dravida, which is the older one, which is the South Indian temple. And some scholars also identify Visara, the Andhra Karnataka, as a separate style. Although, again, I follow Adam Hardy mostly when I go to study Indian temples. For him, the Visara is basically a fusion between the Dravida and the Nagara. So he identifies Dravida and Nagara as the two basic styles. But in some books, you might find, I'm seeing some red lines coming up. Is it me or is it? Uh, I don't know if you guys are seeing these lines.
Maybe someone is wrong.
Oh, okay. Never mind. All right. So typologies refer to origins and are not confined to a geographical area. Now, this is very key, as I will show you examples where we find North Indian style temples in South India, and you can also find South Indian style temples in North India. So it does not matter where in the physical geography of India the temple is. It matters where the origin of that style is from. All right. Typologies help identify differences in plan forms, elevations, and ornamentations. And also remarkable variations exist within these broad types as well, depending upon various factors, including time period, region, and patronage. So that's about the Dravida and the Nagara. And we must remember the most important point is that they're not confined to a geographical area. So now we will start looking at some Dravida or South Indian style temples. And of course, there are many of them, and I have only collected selected a few to illustrate perhaps the most prominent examples, and pardon me if I miss some. And also to have a discussion about how these forms evolve and to understand the geometric progression behind them, which has been later, post-rationalized by architectural historians. The first most prominent example that comes to my mind is the Dharmaraja Ratha in Mahabalipuram, which is in South India, in Tamil Nadu. And it was constructed in 650 Common Era by the Pallava dynasty. Now, notice very closely that this is an entirely rock cut structure, and as you can see the remaining of the rocks in and around. For the sense of scale, you can see that this is not really a huge temple. It's a medium-sized temple, probably a 3 to 4 story residence in like our nowadays the proportion that we use. But most importantly, I want to turn on the spotlight. Let's see. Yeah. So how do we understand that this is a South Indian temple? We look at the Vimana structure, which is mostly a pyramidal structure, if you abstract it. And we also look at the top. We look at the crowning on the top, which is like this. All right. And as you can see, these smaller portions, smaller shrine-like things, they are reflecting the earlier wooden typologies that we looked back. All right, so these are like barrel vault-like structures which are placed in a certain proportion. So you have two here, two here, two here, and then you have two, two, two. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at a distance, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you have 3, and then you have the final thing. And of course you have a frontal colonnade here, and I'll show you the plan. So this is the plan of the Dhamaraja Ratha. It's a square plan, very kind of simple and humble structure. And this is the elevation. Now, when you look at the elevation, try to understand the geometry behind it. And if you were to create a logic for it, how would you go about it? All right. So equally divided spaces with columns. These are the circular ones. These are the frontal columns, and so on and so forth. But try to identify that this is a South Indian temple by looking at its Vimana. Now, the Dharmaraja Ratha is a part of the Pancharatha. Pancharatha means 5 Rathas. Ratha is basically a chariot, or it's kind of a, you can say, God's automobile or something like that. But these are not moving, but there is movement in the designs, but they're not physically moving. And there are 5 different Rathas. It's a very important historical and a heritage site as well. And you will notice that there are already exceptions occurring. So you will find a different structure here, which is a barrel vault-like structure. It's a rectangular plan form, as you can make it. And this one is a Chala structure. It's a Draupadi Ratha. Draupadi is a important character from the Mahabharata, the epics of India. And the Draupadi Ratha has a very different structure. It's like almost like a thatched roof made out of stone. But it has has a square plan form. And then there are other sculptures which have deeper mythological importance, and as you explore, you will know more about them. Then we are looking at the Short Temple in Mahabalipuram, which is also by the Pallava dynasty. And as you can tell from the name, that the Short Temple is next to a shore, which is next to the Indian Ocean, or I don't know, Indian Ocean and parts of Bay of Bengal, I guess. So, and you can see that from the Dharmaraja Ratha, the Vimana has grown taller, and people have also added a sort of a mandapa in front of it, right? So now you see that the form of the South Indian temple getting a bit sharper and taller. And this is not a rock cut, but a rock masonry, which means that pieces of rocks were brought together and put on each other, on top of each other, and then all handmade, articulated. They didn't have rhino or grasshopper, of course, but but they understood the geometry of what they wanted. So they were very clear about adhering to a certain signature or certain style, and top it off with this crowning piece here. Uh, and I apologize for I did not find a. Sorry, I probably mentioned it's a mandapa, and that's when I realized that this is not a mandapa. This is another smaller shrines. So this is the plan, and this is the elevation. And again, the elevation is kind of mirrored onto the plan. So this part is the smaller Shiva and Vishnu shrine, and this part is the larger Shiva shrine. And you have a pathway which goes like this, and then go in here and like this. Now, if you look at one of the finest examples in this era, in the 700, is probably the Brihadeshwara temple in Thanjavur, or some people like to call it Tanjore, and it's from the Chola dynasty. Now, of course, you can see the growth or the evolution of not only, I mean, it reflects also the not only the growth of techniques and architectural confidence in temple making, but also you can kind of make a sense that the patronage has also kind of bourgeoised in making of these temples. The patronage has grown. There are more money being pumped in making temples. And if you try to count them, I think there are 13 or 14 stories of these happening, but it still has that pyramidal form, and it's really beautiful piece of architecture. And you can see that the scale has grown mammothly. Here is one human being, and in comparison, this is one human being. All right, so we are going from a very humble 3-story ratha structure to a much larger in a time period of 100 years, uh, to the Brihadeshwara temple, right? And it's a linear rectangular form. These structures on the right side of your screen, they where my pointer is right now, are the gateways. And these gateways are mostly known as gopuram. The way to identify which one is the gateway and which one is the main structure or the main superstructure, the easy clue is to look at their top. So when you see a barrel vaulted top, chances are these are the gateways or the gopurams. Also identify them with these punctures in the facade. When you see a more circular or octagonal or squarish kind of top, those are the main shikharas, because we will see examples later in the Dravida style of temples that the gopuram becomes much higher than the vimanas. All right. Now look at the temple plan here. As you can see that A is the sanctuary or the garbhagriha. B, C, and D are 3 mandapas. So like I told you, there are 3 now. Now, since the temple complex is bigger, there are more things happening. The royal patronage has grown. We have 3 mandapas. So one is the Artha Mandapa, then there's the Maha Mandapa, and then there's the Nandi Mandapa. And I'm not going into the details of what each of these mandapas are doing, but it's important to know that the social and the cultural practices around God has been given more space and more articulation and more design investments. And then there's the Gopuram, which is the E. Here it is spelled as Gopura, also spelled as Gopuram. And then I guess F is, where is F? Anyway, so this is the main looking at it as a rectangular structure of or a complex, and it's also kind of trying to become like an urban complex or a let's say proto-urban complex. And these colonnades that you see all around are the prakara or the prakaram, which is a boundary wall. Now, the temple is within a bounded complex, which is more governable than having a standalone shrine. Um, we are again the sequence of these temples are not in a chronology now, because the reason I'm going back and forth is because in most literature they are categorized in terms of geography and patronage. We are looking at the Lat Khan temple in Aihole because not all geographies have developed equivalently. It's not like people in Tanjavur has developed something, and that has directly been translated to people in southern Gujarat or in other Karnataka, for example. So Lat Khan temple is in Aihole, and the reason for choosing an aerial view of this temple is that we are looking at a stone temple, but you can identify that these roof structures, they are not typical South Indian temples that I showed you right now, but these roof structures are basically mimicking a wooden roof structure, right? Or a thatched roof structure made of bamboos or wood pillars, wood posts, right? So that is very important because although we are using stone, or although the architects of these temples are using stone, they are kind of either paying homage to their wooden ancestors, or they are simply using that form because that is the one that they are comfortable with or they know about. All right. But you can again see that the basic concept of having one shape and the smaller iteration of that shape on top of it, and then there's a smaller iteration of that shape on top of it, that exists. The concept of having a hierarchy, concept of having a rise, concept of having something at the top which is a part of the bottom, and then something in the middle which is part of the bottommost, that remains in all of the temples here. Here's another example from Aihole, which is the Durga temple. Now, since I talked about the early plan forms, you can see that this one has a curvilinear facade, and it's very interesting look at because curves are often more difficult to make than straight lines, when especially if you're working with stone and your construction technique is not governed by a Revit file or a Rhino diagram. So you are using basically all handmade techniques to achieve this form, which is quite exquisite, and we can all appreciate the craftsmanship that went behind these making of this. Now, I have a quick, short question. I don't expect you to like answer it right away, but I guess we can ask, identify the plan form by looking at the picture of this. And I will just wait a second, but I guess most of you can identify it. It is the apsidal plan form, which is rare, but not totally, not as rare as the circular one. So remember, the one of the examples of the apsidal plan form is here in Aihole, the Durga temple. There are others in Kerala, which I don't think I have an example of, but this is, do we have chat messages here? Apsidal, yes, Rishabh, that's apsidal, right? Um, so, but moving on, the important thing that I want to draw a comparison of is that if you look at the Chaitahals, which are rock-cut Buddhist worship places, parts of the Buddhist monastery tradition, which a picture of which I showed you in the very beginning when I was talking about the early influences, is this entire structure is cut from a rock. You find this plan form has a direct influence on the plan form of the Durga temple, right? And you have that circumambulatory path, which means that here is your main deity, let's say the goddess Durga, and you have an entrance, the sequence. There is a particular space in the front for people to proceed into, have a procession into. It's very linear. It justifies that linearity by adding more columns to it and identifying the centrality of it. And then you have a direct relationship with God, and you have a circular or a circumambulatory relationship with God. And there are many different kinds of spatial and cultural and religious practices which makes the devotees or the workshops use that space as such. So there would be a sequence of doing worships. One, you do something here, and then you do something here, then you do something here, and then you go all around and do something again. So all of this space is very much a living space when the worship or the deity is being worshipped. So we are not to look at them as static spaces only to flank and articulate the form, but very usable and using with a religious and symbolic significance. So there is a movement within these stone structures. And as you can see, the most important space is this one articulated by this Vimana, which is incomplete here, as you can see here. Now, one of the one of the most interesting sites for me is perhaps the Pattadakal temple complex, and I'm getting chat messages. Was initially a sun temple and later on the Shiva or Vishnu temple. Maybe I am not sure about the deity here, but I just assume that, yeah, it can be true. Um, okay. Um, Now, the Pattadakal temple complex is very interesting because as you can see that we identify this one as a South Indian temple, this one as a South Indian temple as well. But the guy in the middle is quite different, and it is a North Indian style temple in Pattadakal from the Chalukya dynasty. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, that it is not only the case that temple which are in North India are North Indians. There can be North Indian or Nagara style temples in geographical South India as well, and which is why Pattadakal is very interesting because it has 4 temples which are in the Dravida style, 4 temples which are in the Nagara style, and 1 Jain temple. Uh, we are looking at the Virupaksha temple in the Pattadakal, which is a South Indian temple, and I'll show you more examples from Pattadakal later on when we go to the North Indian side as well. But just to know that you have a square and a rectangular form, basically a rectangular form evolving. You can see the half plan. This is the mandapa in the front, and you have the main shrine here, and you have the Vimana, which is here. More examples from Hampi, which is in and around 1400 CE, Vijayanagara dynasty. It is the Virupaksha temple in Hampi, not the Virupaksha temple in Pattadakal. It's important to note that these are not the main shrines. This one, this guy here, and this guy here are gopurams. And now you see that the gopurams are larger than the main shrine. This happens in South Indian temples in particular, where the gopuram becomes the main urban landmark and the gateway becomes more elaborate. The shrine becomes smaller and the shrine remains as it is, and or rather smaller, right? Actually, I think this one is also a gateway. The shrine might be on the left. Yeah, so this is the platform. As you can see, this is the main gopuram here. Then there is a smaller gopuram here. Then there's a smaller gateway here. This is the shrine, which is really not that elaborate. Sorry. And then there's a water tank, more shrines, more stuff's happening here and there. But one of the things that you identify, there's a long progression of colonnades, or the prakara has become really elaborate. The bounding space, the bounding structure has become really elaborate here. And just to give you a sense of the speciality, this is quite a stunning photograph that I found. It tells you that how much growth or evolution architecturally and design wise has happened with Indian temples, and they've become almost like mini urban conditions in themselves. So you can basically have a life inside the temple and never need to go out of it because it's a continuously lived space. And you can also see the reflection of the patronage of the dynasties in how these spaces are articulated. Um, and of course, maybe all of you, or I hope most of you are familiar with this example, which is from Ellora. And this is a rock cut temple. It's a huge temple. It's very famous. But again, to appreciate it even more, we should understand that this is a rock cut temple. The entire piece of this temple is cut from one single piece of rock, and it's around 700 and 800. See, this is in Ellora. Many of you, I'm sure there are many participants from India here, and many of you might have gone there, seen it, and appreciated it. If you have visited India, this is of course one of the first places that you should visit. It's on the tourism list bucket. I'm sure that it's visited by all over the world, people from all over the world. So it's by the Rashtrakuta dynasty. And this is the plan. All right. Now we do not see rather much difference in the plan forms. Although it's a rock cut temple, we see that it's basically a rectangular temple with smaller sub shrines here and shrine here. And then there is an entrance sequence which kind of elaborates the or accentuates the actual layout of this space, right? And you see the sections here. So all these spaces are carved out from a rock, and that is what makes it even more interesting rather than being a beautiful temple in itself, right? And you see the elevation and you see the line of this mountain here. So it's quite overwhelming to have achieved this much of architectural complexity and finesse, let's say, in this era. And again, to give you an idea of scale, I have another picture, and of course, this is a building which is really beautiful to look at, and you can find more pictures online, I'm sure. It's very Instagrammed in a sense that people go there and post a lot of Instagram photos. There are music videos happening here, a lot of things happening, and you can see the scale of this building, right? Remember the scale of the Dharmaraja Ratha that we saw in the early days of South Indian temples, and look at the Kailasa temple in Ellora. It has become gigantic. In this phase, it has become gigantic. It's huge. You can see people walking in this, and you can see that the whole place is almost like a kind of a complex on its own, right? Defining its own spaces and spatialities and articulations. And another more important thing to observe, that the most important part, which is the vimana, and these barrel dome structures, which are the articulations on its sides, they have still remained mostly similar, identifying the stylistic integrity of South Indian temples, right? So they have grown in size. They have, of course, grown in articulation, and of course, have achieved a larger feat in terms of construction. But they have also remained the same in a way, and which is why we identify them as typologies. Now, another example, which is perhaps a bit different, is the Hoysalaswara temple in Halibut. It's a much later one. It's 1200 CE. The most important part of this, that it has two vimanas, so that you don't see that much often. But this one is a very interesting example from the Hoysalaswara temple. We are not going to ask you to name the temples. We are not going to ask you anything like that. So it is not important for you to identify and remember the names and the eras and the dynasties or the locations of it, but to understand only the formal aspect or the formalist understanding of the temple, because that's what we are mainly looking at here. So I don't want this to become like a history lecture, as in like a proper history lecture, but to understand that there are two vimanas and what is happening here, because we can already identify that the shape is similar in its if you look at its overall layout, but the geometry is certainly more complex, and you can make it out. If you look at the plan, it becomes more clear. If you look at the edge of the plan, where is my annotation spotlight? Yeah, you see how the square has rotated and almost made it like a star-like structure, which you do when you use the rhino and the grasshopper codes. If you make further iterations, it becomes very, the square, and you rotate it and you rotate it and you rotate it, and it becomes like a star. Or the square, you have the edges, and then you rotate those edges, it becomes almost like a star-like structure. So that is what happened with the Hoysalaswara temple in Halibut. So you can see um, there are two sanctums, and there are two sanctums and two mandapas in front, and they're connected by this vestibule. And then there are other shrines here. The Nandi shrine is a repeating element that we will see in many South Indian temples. If you read further, you will find that the Nandi shrine is kind of it's a vahana or like a kind of a pet, not a pet exactly, but it's a very important part. But you'll find Nandi shrines all over Indian temples, and they mostly face the main shrine, right? Okay. And of course, no discussion of the South Indian temples can be complete without looking at the great, the fantabulous, I guess, really the most remarkable of all, the Meenakshi temple, perhaps the most remarkable of all, the Meenakshi temple. It's a huge temple, and it's a temple still being used for worship. And it earlier, the Meenakshi temple, what I was reading, it had an earlier precedence, and then it was reconstructed and made into this large, huge complex by the Nayaka dynasty much later. And as you can see now, this whole thing is not only a proto-urban space, it has become a city in itself. It has almost become like a city fabric, right, in Madurai. It's almost like a whole place on its own. There are multiple gopurams, there are multiple prakarams, and there are multiple shrines, and there are of course thousands and thousands of devotees from all across India, from all walks of life, coming and offering their prayers. Mostly Hindu, but I guess people visit it for other purposes as well than worship. But if you look at the gopurams have become taller, more articulated, more elaborate, more enriched, and you can now see the scales of the temple increasing manifold, multifold enhancement of the architectural uh, space, right? And you can see now, for comparison of scale, you can see the city fabric behind, and you can see the buildings are like this. The gopurams are like gigantic. You can see the skyline is also really beautiful. This is a great picture to look at. And but you have to understand that these structures on the prakarams are not the shrines. They're not the vimanas. They're the gopurams, right? And there are, we can see three, four, five. I don't know how many. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, and nine gopurams here. And must be the one that the photograph is being taken from is also a gopuram, right? Now, this is again, we're returning to Adam Hardy's understanding. Now, there have been many historians talking about, many Western and Indian historians talking about Indian temple architecture, but particularly I focus on Adam Hardy because he's the one who talks about its evolution in a very geometric and architectural way, in a very formalist way. And to understand evolution, you have to understand the whole journey of Indian temples, and also to acknowledge that there cannot be one line, or there was perhaps no line of evolution, but we kind of construct that line of evolution. There, no one actually had a master plan that the first South Indian temple will be like this, the 10th one will be like that, and then the 20th one will be, like that. But it is almost like an experimentation happening in time. And then when we're looking at the past with the distance from the future, we are identifying those forms which help us understand the underlying geometric logic, which we are interested in this workshop, to understand the parametricism in Indian temples, right? So you see this A, this is the small edicule, B, C, D. So they are growing in size, one getting on top of the other, one getting on top of the other, the smaller versions on the top, the larger on the bottom. And also there is a certain idea of movement. So this is again Adam Hardy's interpretation. You can have your own interpretation. If you go and study Indian temples, I bet you will find 1,000 other things that historians have not found, because it's an evolving subject. And then you have the rotations happening from D onwards, and you see more elaborate facades emerging. And almost here, the platform has started from the square. And as you keep on adding more edges to it, rotating it, it becomes almost like a star-like structure, right? So this is the diagram summarizing the evolution of the Karnataka Dravida tradition, 7th to 13th centuries. Upper right interpretation, unfolding of multiple Shala edicule, right? So that is about mostly the South Indian temple typologies. I hope that has been a useful way of, just briefly going through all the temple typologies and not looking at all the temples perhaps, but to understand that this is how we identify the larger Dravida tradition of Indian temples. I have a quick quiz, and this is we are not grading you, but when I teach my students, I love quizzing them without grading them. It's a quick quiz. Is this statement Nagara style temples can only be found in North India? Is it true or false? So with that, we will take a quick 5 minute break and return to you soon. Think about it as how do I? Okay, yeah. So I will be back in 5. So you guys think about it, and I will be back very soon with the next part of our presentation. And I already see chats flowing in. Yeah, you got it right. If everyone is saying false, that's very right. Uh, think about the examples we talked about, and I will be coming back to you in 5. All right. Hello, guys. Are we all here? Yeah, like everyone has responded, it is false because we saw an example in Pattadakal where we found a Nagara style temple in in South India. Right. Good. Okay. Any questions so far? Anyone has any doubts? You want me to go back to something again? Any question? You can unmute and speak to me directly, or write in the chat box, whichever is convenient for you. Right? Is everyone here? I don't know. All right.
Hey Shomo, this is Joy here. I'm just going to
Okay.
butt in for a second. If you guys have returned to your laptop or PC, can anyone answer in the affirmative so that we can continue with the rest of the presentation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with waiting a couple more minutes as well. Uh, all right. So Nitish and Kush, just I can see the chat messages. They're saying that all going good. Uh, and maybe many of you who have studied Indian temple before, maybe you're already familiar with these. So this is a chance to, this is an opportunity for us to go back to it and understand it again, revise the earlier lessons. I guess most of our students are architecture students or architects. Mostly, when I was looking at the applications, I saw mostly architecture students. So it must be familiar. All right. Um, right. So now we will proceed to the second part, which is the Nagara or the North Indian style. As you can see, is okay. Someone else. Uh, right, Kosh. Yes, you're absolutely right. There is an interpretation of comparing the proportion of a temple with a human body, and that arises from the tradition of Vastu Purusha Mandala, which is, I will break it down, and I'm sure you know about this as well. Many of you might be familiar with this concept. The Vastu means land. The Purusha is basically a male body, and mandala is, like we discussed in the beginning, is a diagram. So the space around the land is interpreted with the proportion of the human body. Now that has both a physical dimension to it as well as a mythical dimension to it, and which is why Indian temples and many traditional Indian forms, where in fact the Vastu Purusha Mandala is evolving around that proportion of the human body, both in a physical dimensional scale as well as in a mythical scale. I think Kush has shared an image, but it's not showing here. Uh, uh, yes. Uh, yeah, I can see Kush has sent me an image. I don't know if you guys can see it, where the whole temple structure is interpreted. If you guys download this image, you can see that uh, is interpreted with respect to the proportion of the human body. And that is one way of looking at it. And that is one of the most uh, important way of looking at it, because that's how they were conceived mostly. And so that, thank you for that pointer. Uh, Now, as you can see, the North Indian temple is a typical North Indian temple. Looks like this. This is the Shikhara. That's where we are mostly interested in, and as like it's extremely in time to bring in the example of the human body. As you can see, the words here kind of is a reflection of the parts of the human body. The griva means neck, the skandha means shoulder, and then you have the jangha, which means the knee, right? So it's like the knee is here, the neck is here, and this is mostly like a human body. Although the other elements are not directly related to the human body, but they also kind of come into play. And this is, you can say, this is the head, this is the body, this is the legs, and so on and so forth. But we will identify the North Indian temple by its typical shikhara and the form of the shikhara. And also notice that the amlaka, this thing, I don't know what's the English of amlaka. It's a fruit, all right? It's a fruit which gets the form of that fruit is placed on top, all right? And then there's the kalasa, which I guess also Joy mentioned in day one as I was listening. The kalasha is basically a piece of pottery here. Um, Now, again, starting with the simpler, the smaller, adicular, shrine-like structures in North India, the Dashavatara temple. Dash avatar means there are 10 avatars, not the film Avatar, but probably the film Avatar draws the inspiration from here. The Dashavatar temple in Deoghar, the 500 CE, this is a Gupta temple. And as you can see, this is, if you just look at it closely, you will identify this is a very simple square shaped temple, right? Then we look at the Someswara temple in Kiradu. This is the Solanki dynasty, which who are also identified as the Chalukya dynasty. And this is in Rajasthan. And you see that this is broken and this, I mean, dilapidated structure, but you can see that the Nagara style shikhara has this particular character of repeating itself. So as we as we expand, the movement in the plan form becomes directional. The four main directions which connect to the four main directions of Brahma, and also the concept of one emerging from the other. So there is a mythical dimension to it. Is like in the world, the idea is that you have one, and from one it becomes two, and from two it becomes four, and four it becomes eight. There is a progression of things. And that is what gets interpreted in the geometric logic of doing or making temples. So you have one main, and then it gets interpreted in a smaller, or the smaller from the smaller it, so the part to whole and the whole to part logic is what gets incarnated in stone here, right? Then there is the Mala Devi temple in Garaspur Pratihara style 900. See, now this one is again identifiable quite easily as you look at the Shikhara, and then you look at the Amlaka here. Most interestingly, this temple is a rock cut temple. And earlier it was a Hindu temple. Later it became a Jain temple. Now, as we know that India is a land of many religions, and we will find that if you read religion history, I'm sure you are familiar that both Buddhism and Jainism emerged within the Hindu fabric of India, and but they're very different from Hinduism at the same time. But in earlier cases, we see that in around 900 CE, in this particular example, we are finding a temple which is designed as a Hindu temple being transformed into a Jain temple, right? And as you can see, again, a rectangular form. The plan form of the North Indian and the plan form of the South Indian temple, geometry-wise, is there are a lot of similarities. The differences, however, lie in the way the shikharas are constructed. The way the shikhara is more like a, right, yeah, and how they are topped in the, how the topmost form come into play. We are again returning to this very interesting site of Pattadakal, because like we mentioned earlier, and you guys also answered the quiz, and I told you in the beginning as well that do not confuse North Indian temples as temples from North India, but more as a style, which is why the Nagara word is more appropriate. Here in Papanatha temple, we find a North Indian style shikhara in South India, right? and this is by the Chalukya dynasty. As you can see that these barrel wall like structures, they're mostly more common in South Indian temples. But then again, the Shikhara here is again, and Adam Hardy identifies this as the Latina form of the Nagara style, which is kind of very a shape which has a kind of a curvature to it, which I guess also you guys did some experiments on with this basic form, also albeit abstracted to a level that is manageable on Rhino, um, in this form, right? And again, another example of the Sun Temple in Modera. Of course, you guys must have seen this because it's heavily Instagrammed. It's a popular tourist destinations, and again, also site of various Indian cultural productions. And this one is more famous for its what the stepped well in front of it. And we are not we are very much interested in this form as well here, but it you cannot escape this huge stepped well. And many of you might be familiar with it, as there is again the core logic is a very parametric logic. As you can see that there are uh, steps going into the well from all sides, creating a rhythm which is both emanating a sense of beauty and inheriting a sense of geometric logic, one into the other and one emerging from the other, or one following the other, a sequence of things happening and a rhythm emanating from it. So this is from the 1026, 1027. So the date is a bit confusing here, because what I read is that it's definitely constructed after 1026 and 1027. We are not sure about the exact date of completion. Here is another picture where you can see the shikhara, which is in North Indian Nagara style. There's smaller shikharas here, probably they are smaller shrines. And you can see the temple complex plan here. And you can see the most elaborate part of both the socio-cultural function and the architectural space is the water tank in front of it, right? And there are very many practices around water. Water is important in Hindu religion, in every religion, I guess. Water has a very elemental, essential significance. And thus, this space becomes really interesting. Many of you might, in for your design exercise, might want to explore this one if you are, or maybe we will explore this one in along with exploring the shikaras. But I guess it's what is to be appreciated here is that these forms and these geometries are being achieved incrementally by hand. We are not having an automated construction technique nor an automated design technique. So understanding the mathematical logic behind it becomes important. The most, perhaps one of the most illustrative example of Nagara style temples, whenever we talk about the Nagara style, is the Lingaraj temple in Bhubaneswar. It's a Kalinga temple, and you can see there are many shrines in and around, but this is the main shrine. And this is the, the Amlaka on top of it, and then there is the Mandapa in front of it. So this is in Orissa, and you can see the articulation of the geometry, smooth. It's a smooth geometry having a very nice curve all around it, and that's what identifies the North Indian temple as separately from the South Indian temple, right? So, and here you can see a section. It's a linear um, rectangular form. Just to be clear here that the mandir here and Nath mandir and Bhog mandir, now you can see that the word mandir is being used, but it is, these are, variations of languages in Orissa. These are identified as Nath mandir and Bhog mandir. But in particular, if we want to have a coherent terminology, we would identify them as mandapas. Nath mandapa, Nath basically means dance. So it's like a dance mandir, and bhog is basically eating. So you are having the prasadas or the food from the god, and this is the Jagmohan, which is another space, which is the main mandapa space in front of the Sri Mandir, which is the sanctum sanctorium. As you can see, the person who was drawing this could not finish it here, and we put on the upper part of the shikhara right here. All right, and you have a plan of the shikhara from below and from above. So, and this is where, when whenever I look at this diagram, I was thinking about the twin curve command that Joy was discussing on day one. You have a curve in the below, and you have a curve in the top, and then you have a shape that connects it and creates this shape. All right. And just to give you an example of what the scale of the place is like, you can see that through the series of mandapas, we're going towards that main shikhara over here. And then there's a procession. You see that the linearity of the architectural plan form kind of expands beyond the main structure and becomes like a line that follows. All right. So I guess these examples are being clear enough to make the distinction between the North Indian and the South Indian style, or the Nagara and the Dravida style. And then another example is the Konarak Sun Temple, which is in Konarak. It is also in Orissa, and it would be the most. It would have been the most, the highest shikhara in North India, had it not been destroyed in cyclones. So the yellow portion that you see in this section is the part that is remaining. So we are not looking at the shikhara here. We are looking at the Jagmohan, or the mandapa in front of it. And the shikhara is now destroyed. So this temple is under, this is not used anymore, but it's still a very important destination, both for tourists and for architectural historians and archaeologists and other historians as well. But it's a sun temple, which would have the largest shikhara. Now you can understand that we are almost reaching the limits of stone construction. You can only grow a certain height in stone, right? You cannot make an Empire State Building out of stone, right? I mean, you may be, but it's very difficult. And since this is a very cyclone prone zone, the idea of lateral loads and all the other more modern understanding of loads have not come into place. So, but we have an exquisite design nonetheless, and you can see that only if the scale of the Jagmohan, the shrine in the front, is this much compared to the human being here. And I have visited this temple myself. It's huge. It's gigantic. You can only imagine what the scale of the shikhara would be. The shikhara would be somewhere probably here, where my red dot is, and that would be really a magnificent scale, an overpowering and almost intimidating scale, to be honest. Even the Jagmohan is quite intimidating here. But again, we may not see the actual design, as we don't have evidence of it. But again, this is a very important example of the Nagara style. Then perhaps the most famous, the most well-known, the most articulate, and the most mature design, and I use the word perhaps because it's always a perhaps, it's a subjective understanding, is the Kandaria Mahadeva temple in Khajuraho. Many of you might have looked at this example, may have visited it as well. It is really a work of art at one of the most highest level, and I encourage you to read more about it. Adam Hardy again studies this in detail, and to understand, this is one of those examples which you look at to understand North Indian temples. It's like, if you want to understand North Indian temples, look at the Kandaria Mahadeva temple, as it's only from an architecture point of view, it is one of the finest example. And you see it's almost like a kind of a thing that has this connection from the ground. So basically what is happening in a temple is that there is the datum or the land which is interpreted both in a physical architectural dimension, also in a mythical design dimension, right? And then there's a connection with God, and God is almost in all cultures, God is up above, right? But the god, the deity, the physical form of the god resides here, and that's why it gets the highest importance. Almost like there's a movement, it is not, it's although it's crafted and captured in stone, there is a movement of which is talking to the universe in a way. And whether you agree or disagree with the Hindu view of the universe is not the question here. The question is whether you understand why the architecture is the way it is in this temple, right? So we are more interested in understanding the logic behind the geometries, why this is happening, and how we may interpret it today, standing in 2020 via this Zoom network, looking at these structures which existed much before us. And then also you can see that there is a considerable amount of opening into the temples, which is very particular to the Khajuraho group of temples, because most temples, when you make something out of stone, you do not have space for much opening because they are load bearing structures, right? But these balconies make it very airy and there is enough sunlight coming in, which is not really common in most traditional forms of temple geometries. You don't have much of sunlight inside, let alone sunlight inside the garbhagriha. It's basically a very dark place with the god, the deity inside that temple, inside the garbhagriha. But here you see these balconies which bring in light inside. And again, I am returning back to the various parts of the temple. This is, I grabbed it from some website. So you have the Shikhara, which is the main tower. You have the Garbhagriha, which is the shrine inside the Shikhara. Then you have the Pradakshina, which is the circumambulatory path. Then you have the transepts, which are important ornamental articulations at the facade. And you see how that plan form has folded, expanded, folded, expanded, and folded, expanded, and made this kind of a very gradual shape, right? And then you have, of course, I guess two mandapas here, the three mandapas. Is the entrance porch with Ardha Mandapa, then the Maha Mandapa, and then the Mandapa in the middle. And all of them kind of have this, if you follow this line, there is and if you are standing here, here is a human being. You can see both the power of this form over this human and or whichever the worshipper is, and also the kind of the scale of intimidation not in a bad sense, but intimidation in a sense that the god is indeed greater now. The god is not no more the Deoghar temple, small small shrine where you have to bow down and enter. But this is the interpretation of the architecture for god has become that somewhere you look up and you rise to it. So that's what happens with the relationship of the human scale versus the temple scale. And I guess I have one more picture of this. And yeah, the plan form again, you see we are most interested in this workshop, of course, and also further you can explore it on your own, to understand the geometry. When it starts from a simple square, then you expand it to a grid of squares, and then you take the edges of the square in a particular sequence to embrace that centrality, linearity, and the sense of direction and movement in the four directions, right? And you have this kind of a form emerging out of it, and which I guess we will explore in detail through the design exercise. And then you see that again kind of emerging into the stairs. The stairs are also going into the directions. Of course, historians like Adam Hardy would say that these are movements in universe. And I think Adam Hardy's interpretation is quite on the point, to not look at these forms as a static form, but to look at them as part of movements in directions, right? And of course, to understand that the procession if you are visiting this temple as a devotee or otherwise, you are kind of governed by this geometry to follow a certain path. So you enter here, you rise up the stairs, then you enter the port, then you enter the mandapa, enter the great mandapa, and then finally you go here, and then you have the circumambulatory path, which you also can go through. So on the Garbhagriha Shikhara and the other spaces around it. And this is from the other side, and you see the tremendousness, the really the achievements of the craftsmen and the designers of this particular example. You see that the Shikhara here on the top has 4 on 4 sides, tuck, 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 and then you have 4 more on 4 other side, and then you have these corners where there are miniature kutas, or the smaller shrine-like edicular structures, and then you have 3 of them in each corner, so it makes it 12, and then you have more, and then you have more, and then you have more. So this geometry is really it's very I would use the word eloquent in its logic, but it becomes really complicated when you look at it at once. So our task is to identify the logic behind it, to identify the sequence behind it, right? And they're really not so simple to decipher unless you look at them closely and identify the patterns and the similarities in these forms. Again, I'm returning to the same article that I have been referring to, the Hindu temples and the emanating cosmos. There are the mythological dimension of Adam Hardy's interpretation of a particular text. It's called the Sangama Sutra Dhara, I guess. It's from 1100, where these logics are written in Sanskrit, and there is an English translation of it as well. That how to design this. So basically, you are being given something equivalent to a Neufert's architectural standards, or something equivalent to a time saver standards, although in a very different geopolitical and question. Right, Rishabh, you are absolutely right. It's Samarangana Sutra Dhara by Bhoja Deva. Absolutely. And there is an English translation of this book, which I could not find a PDF of, but I came across it long back once. So you see, this is the kind of exercise that I guess all of us will take part in. So you see how the plan form kind of dictates the elevation form, and you have the smaller growing into the larger in a sequence, right? So again, a chat message. Right. No, that yes, Rishabh. I could locate the English translation, but I haven't found the English translation yet. It's there on Amazon, but I also have found the Hindi translation, which has got several chapters. You know, what we are most interested in, the kind of parametric code, along with a lot of mythical and religious directions as well. But yeah, the Samarangana Sutradhara is basically the grasshopper code, or the huge grasshopper code library behind Indian temple making. And yes, thank you for reminding me of that name. It's written over here, but it's by Bhoja Deva, is the author, I guess, author or the patron of that book. So you see that sequence which we discussed in the North Indian temples here, and you see how elaborate the plan form also becomes. Yeah. Now again, a quick quiz, which basically tells us that you guys have not slept off and listening to me for so long talking about Indian temples. Which of the following sites have both Dravida and Nagara style temples and don't give out? Okay, so the answer is here. All right, all right. Okay, got it. So everyone knows that it's Pattadakal, and which is why it is one of the most interesting examples. And now I to an image of Pattadakal, and I ask everyone to you know, discuss and understand or identify the styles of the superstructures. So I guess, Joy, we are doing good on the time here, I guess.
Yep, I guess so. I mean,
Yeah.
we're 1 hour and 40 minutes in, which leaves us with
All right.
about 1 hour and 20 minutes more. So,
Okay, cool.
I mean, you can stretch your presentation, or if it gets concluded before the end of the 3 hour mark, then probably we can head over
Yeah.
to an exercise or two. I
No,
mean,
I
it's
mean
flexible.
my presentation overall is done. I was thinking about I have one more slide where I have some more resources for people to look at. And then we can discuss about the assignments and also maybe, meet our participants a bit. Maybe we can devote 10-15 minutes to, meeting our participants, people who have stuck with us for the last 3 days, across different time zones and different spaces. Because I'm just looking at this whole screen and a lot of names and just talking, but it would be nice to meet. I guess you talked with some of them in the earlier 2 days, but it would be nice to meet some of them if possible. So again, I will give you the answers here. As you can see, the first one on the left uh, is a Nagara. This is also a Nagara. This is also a Nagara. This is a Vimana. This is a South Indian one. Then there's another Vimana here. Then there's another Nagara here. And then there's another Vimana here. So this is the styles of the superstructures. They're all in one site. And so you identify, and this is what is good. You can identify the typologies in one site about the site of Pattarago. All right. More resources. This is a website of my friend who recently, one of the writers published a small read on Dravidian style of temples in South India. And it's a quick read. It's a quick read to get started with reading about temples. And if you are new to the architecture of temples in general, I recommend looking at this particular post. Then I very highly recommend you look at Adam Hardy's YouTube channel. Just type Professor Adam Hardy YouTube channel, I guess, Adam Hardy Temple Architecture of India. And he has also been, this pandemic time, everyone is coming online. And I saw he was never really much present on the internet, but his YouTube channel started in like a couple of months back. I guess everyone is talking about it, and he has hour-long videos which are really elaborate and really awesome, basically. And where he also kind of jumps around, dances, and animates the progression of um, the form and the evolution and the typology of Indian temples. So I highly recommend you see this. And then there is the other way of looking at it, which is the encyclopedic way of looking at it, not looking at it is necessarily through a logic of geometry, but through a chronology of time periods and geographies, which is the Encyclopedia of Indian Temple Architecture. It's a 5-volume, I guess 6-volume book, or maybe 5-volume book. The PDF is available for free here in this website, Rare Book Society of India. It's a compilation of almost extensive compilation of Indian temples. And you can look at it for future references. You might want to collect it. It would be a nice collection on your bookshelf if you are interested to dig deeper into Indian temple architecture and dig deeper into more. Um, uh, if possible, share the presentation file. That would be helpful. Yes, of course, Nitish, I will be sharing the presentation file with you. I will definitely also copy the links here if that is, okay, wait. All right.
Twinkle is being kind enough to source the links and paste it in the chat
Oh
window. So,
yeah, thank you for doing that. And I will just copy this and paste it here in the chat. Yes. Yeah. I would. In fact, I was also watching Adam Hardy's YouTube channel recently just to prepare for this, and you will find why I am recommending this particular. Oops. Okay. All right. Um, all right. And that's about it. For anyone has any questions, anything you want to look at again, any comments, addition, anything you want to add to this discussion, anything you want to share, or anything else, I would like to have a like open up a discussion with people. I don't know how to do that. Uh, I hope you enjoyed my very brief introduction. Of course, there are much more to add to the Indian temple, understandings of Indian temple, their geometries, their cultural, political, religious histories, and also how we look at temples today. And it's always been part of, in Indian political discourse, it has been a very controversial topics. But let us not go there. But we are mostly interested in the forms of the historical ones. Uh, okay, Joy, can we? Do you have the? Do you have that assignment? What we are going to talk about the assignments ready with you,
No,
or we?
unfortunately, I do not have the format ready. I'll
Okay, but
get
we
it
can
ready.
just talk about the assignments anyway, right?
Yeah, if you can pull up the image which had the four shapes.
Uh, which one do you want me to pull up? The
The one
oh the
with the square, the rectangle,
right,
circle, and
right,
the fourth
right.
shape, which is half a circle and then a rectangle.
Okay. Uh, this one.
Yep, this one.
All right. I'll just stop a video just for a minute and get back to you. So I see a few people have turned on their videos, which is nice. And before we introduce each other, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us for 3 days from wherever you are, in your home, in your office, if you're working from home, or I don't know. Um, it would be great to do an introduction first, maybe, and then go to the, and also understand what people want to do, and what their interests are. So, or do you, Joy, shall we do that first and then
Yeah,
go to the?
I'll interject for a bit and sort of uh, add two pointers which specifically probably we would like to know. Number one is first. Why don't you speak briefly about the four shapes and what you want to do about it, and then I'll connect that with what sort of feedback we want from them along with the introduction.
Right, right. So sorry, I think I just canceled my screen share. So yes, so this is what me and Joy have in mind, that we want you, for the first 2 days, we discussed about Rhino and Grasshopper and how to use them and how to use those tools to, generate geometries of different nature. I guess most of you participated in that. And today I just did a brief introduction to different temple forms and briefly talked about their histories and plan forms and all that. Now we have these basic plan forms, which are square, rectangle, circle, and apsidal. The kind of exercise that we're interested in doing is that we will have, let's say, a A2 layout in landscape, where you use one of these plan forms, one of these basic geometric shapes. You build a narrative around it, and that narrative might be inspired by the examples that you saw today, something you might have encountered earlier in your life. You can basically think you an Indian temple and find a connection between, maybe you have seen some temples, and then you use a rationale or some sort of a geometric logic, something Joy, do you have that at hand, the one that we put it on the Digital Futures Workshop website? I guess many of you have seen it. He did an iteration of the spire of that.
Yeah, I've
Um,
shared that image with them.
all right, so most of
Yesterday.
you have that image, and we want you to do something similar, but also feel free to interpret it, move around, experiment with it, and give us a certain number of iterations of that. From the square, like you have seen, the square is here in the Deoghar temple, and the square is here in the Kandariya Mahadeva temple as well, right? There's a basic square. And so why don't you use the square or the apsidal or the rectangular or the circular and expand upon it a geometry that would be somewhat relatable to an Indian temple in your imagination. So it's more like an exploratory exercise, or a design charrette, if you would like to call that, for you to interpret the formalist aspect of Indian's temple design, as well as sharpen your skills of parametric design platforms. And we will definitely work with the digital workshop fellows up there to make it into an online exhibition or a publication, perhaps. And I think Joy will follow up with that with the folks in the digital workshop, those who are organizing it. But you can also keep it for yourself and maybe put it in your portfolio if you are making a portfolio, or maybe just learn something about temples in this pandemic times. I don't know what exact purposes you would find of it in future, but I guess it would be a worthwhile exercise to try to make digitally some things that were made in stone thousands of years ago. And that's the overall brief or the idea that I had. And if we open up the discussion, and I can see Twinkle and Rishabh and a few other people who have turned on their videos, if you guys would like to chime in. Okay, more screens going online, and tell us what you expect. How have you, are you liking this, or is this I mean, what is your overall feedback? How we may go about in the coming days? Uh, is that okay, Joy, to start
Yeah,
with a,
yeah.
yeah,
So
okay.
I'll just add a couple of lines to what you just explained, uh,
Mhm.
which is, I
Joy,
mean,
can I see your video turned on? I just only see a P for an Indian workshop.
sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Right. Hi.
Hello. Hi.
The idea is to pick one of the shapes. So you get to pick, like all of you get to pick one of the shapes. Uh, might be a case wherein one of the shapes do not like doesn't get picked by anyone. Uh, we don't really care about that as long as you get the freedom to pick the shapes. And then what we're going to do is have you interpret, take those elementary shapes and interpret them and connect them to any aspect of temple, be it a particular element or the entire complex, or plan. For example, if it's a square, you could work with various kinds of mandapas, which the kind of exercise we did yesterday, or you could sort of deconstruct it and make spires, or you could take that and make plants in their entirety in it. So which element you pick, or up to what extent you want to delve into it, is completely up to you. So what we're going to do is, once the shapes are picked, as you develop it, we're going to discuss one-on-one with you guys, and then hopefully by the end of the seventh day, we'll have a comprehensive, uh, not only parametric representation, but also parametric variants of the kind of definition or logic you guys have thought about. So anyway, why don't you guys introduce yourself one by one and
Yeah.
sort of express anything
guess
else that you may be expecting from the workshop, because we're free to sort of tinker around with the structure and um, customize it if the
oh,
overall
let's
consensus goes to a different direction. So yeah, why don't we
yeah
have your
let's
introduction?
start with how everyone is doing and where everyone are and stuffs like that in very briefly, because we have a lot of participants, because I guess what I saw from my colleagues is that people are doing the introduction on day one, and we are doing it on day three, which is fine with me, because it tells me people who have been with us for the last 2.5 days. And again, thanks to all of you for joining in. And so anyway, okay, so I will start with a certain sequence that I see on my uh, grid. All right. Or do you want to, if we unmute everyone at once, it might be a cacophony that would be rather less comprehensible. So I'll start with the person on my right, Stephanie Casanova. Stephanie, would you go ahead and tell us where you're from, why are you interested in this workshop, and what do you expect in and I know this will become really boring because I'll go one by one and ask everyone,
Yes.
but please be patient. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am Stephanie Casanova. I am from Lima, Peru, in South America. I am a maker and architect in English. And I use Rhino, but no grasshopper. And here in Peru, we have a lot of pre-Columbian cultures. I don't know. And we have geometric forms like you. We have a lot of iconography, and I want to make a mix with your technique and with our culture.
Wow, that's really inspiring to hear. Thank you for joining us, and we will. I would really want to know later on, after we're done with introducing at least most of the people whose video I see, um, with uh, your viewpoints about what you expect to do in the exercise part of our workshop. So thanks for being with us, Stephanie. And I move on to Prashant. Are you here with us?
Yeah. Hello. Good evening,
Okay.
everyone. Myself, Prashant Singh from Bareilly. I am fourth year student, and I am interested in this workshop as first time mostly we study this about the temples in history in our curriculum. But in the first time we study about the forms of these temples in these digital forms. Mostly
Right.
we studies about these temples or on papers only, or we do study as a conservation.
Right. Right.
But on the first time on this workshop, we derive the forms of these temples and we go through it.
Right, right. Yeah, and which is why, yeah, absolutely, Prashant. And I think that has been the main experiment that me and Joy wanted to do, given this. We are all.
Actually, as you give an exercise to us only, so that we can derive many other forms from our side on. And I am
Right.
so much thankful to you that you are providing such workshop for us.
Oh, yeah, it's our pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Prashant.
Okay.
And
Welcome.
yeah, yeah. So we will look forward to your experimentation with one of the temple forms in the coming couple of days.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I think next to Prashant is Twinkle, and I would like to, yeah. Okay.
Yes. So I'm studying in Mumbai right now. I'm studying masters in advanced architecture, and initially I've had an interest in semiotics and culture. So I'm looking at how we're using ancient forms and emerging contemporary arts out of it. So I've looked at dying Indian art forms and how they've been a hybrid in the contemporary state, if you may call it. So the reason I was really intrigued by the workshop was because I wanted to understand what was the origin of the form. We usually forget the origins, and then we're always just doing hybrids and we don't know what we've mixed. Like, for all we know, we've somewhere
Yeah.
mixed Islamic and Hindu, and we're calling it Indian architecture. And there's this entire notion of not having a secular state. So there's so much urban politics involved in form making, you don't realize. So you're
Yeah.
mostly just blinded by it. So I think it's really important to know the origin of form. Is why it was one of the
Right.
main reasons I wanted to be a part of the workshop. And because I have thesis coming up in because I'm in my final year, I'm looking at somewhere understanding form and deriving a transgression of the city and culture via form.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
looking
Right.
at something more deployable in its nature, but yes, quite contemporary that way. That's about it.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's absolutely brilliant. And I think one of the main both an advantage and disadvantage of looking at the formalist method of architectural history is that the formalist methods talks only about the form. So if you like, you talk about the history of this cup, you look at the form of the cup. You do not really necessarily look into the politics of this cup or the socio-cultural implication or the urban contextualization of this cup. So we are doing that formalist exercise, but at the same time, it is a way of getting into what you said. What is the origin, or the
Correct.
or the most essential component of that form making. So I think that's a very interesting perspective you brought, and we will look forward to your explorations. And thank you
Definitely.
for joining us. And I think we have yeah, okay, cool. We have Shamonita, I guess I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah, you did. So
Okay.
hi Shomo. I'm Samanvita Ghosh. I'm from Delhi. So I recently graduated from NIT Raipur, and I am working right now. But the main way I was attracted to this workshop, and among so many workshops, I chose this one, was basically I've always wondered, like, how do we arrive at what we are, like, at the stage of, design formations we are at today. And mostly it's a takeaway from westernization. And I mean, there are ways to look at it, but I mean, this workshop, I've never seen it before. It talked about how we are metamorphosizing ourselves from our origins. And that was one parameter that I've never thought about. And the moment I saw the workshop heading, it just clicked to me that there were so many permutations that were undocumented in today's
Right.
day time. And that is the reason I, signed up for this. And I mean, this opens a bigger window to not only just temples and, to other, like you said today, how temples have emerged from the housing that was there initially.
Mhm.
So, like, where did we get from these temples? Like, how these, ancient cultural landmarks have affected our formalist architecture, as you say today. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that is. And plus, I've always meaning to try rhino and grasshopper, and I never, could find the
Yeah.
motivation for it. But this is one thing that really clicked with me, and I signed up for it. I found it really relatable.
Right. Right. You remind me of like what Prashant and Twinkle mentioned, and also Shamonita just told us. Like when I studied Indian temple architecture history back in my undergrad education, it was mostly through drawing sketches and copying plans or looking at plans at most.
Yes.
And I guess both Joy's organization, WEsearch, and Joy himself, is quite an expert on parametric design, and he has done many works on that. So it was a quite a happy marriage between understanding something from a distant past, which we mostly study in history of architecture, and
Yes.
something like Rhino Grasshopper, which we do in computer software and parametric software learning, which are
True.
kind of pedagogically distant, but we can not only bring them together, but speak to the one
Yeah.
can speak to the other in a
Somehow
way.
they are translatable and we never knew about it. Like today
Yeah.
I sit and study
And
and now it makes sense. But yeah, I've been to all these temples that you showed us through. I've been there on my second year. It was our,
okay.
mandatory college trip, and now I just learned about it in a different way. Like I do now as an
Right.
architect. It's a whole
Right.
new world for me. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Akshata, is it Akshata or Khata? I think.
Yes, it's
I don't.
Akshita.
Okay. Hi.
Yeah, hi.
I'm
I
always
am.
always careful before pronouncing names because everyone. Yeah. Go ahead, Akshata. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am from Mumbai. I am currently in the fourth year of architecture. This particularly made me interested in the workshop because I don't know, like, we have had study trips since our first year, and I have been to the in the first year we had gone to Vai, and it was the study of temples there. But back then I remember we used to like when drawing the plans we took only the outside profile which is there. But yesterday while working on Rhino I realized okay that's the repetition of the squares, the internal parts which we actually trim on
Mm-hmm.
Rhino are something that they related to back then, but we did not ever look at that. We just took the outside profile. So yeah, it was
Right.
kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's especially when you look at examples like Kandarya Mahadeva temple. It's so it kind of plays with your eyes. To be honest, when if you stand in front of it, it's difficult to even imagine that it all starts with a simple square, and then that square builds on and builds on, and then it becomes what we have seen. Yeah. So yeah, it's thank you for joining us and being with us for 3 days. We hope to see you all for the coming days as well. Rishabh is the person next to Akshata. Rishabh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I am Rishabh Jain. I'm an architect from Mumbai. So basically, for me, Indian architecture is something which really fascinates me. I've been doing a lot of these heritage walks in the city. I've been conducting those. I've done my courses in Indian aesthetics, Indian iconography, and stuff. But I've always been stayed into history and never come into something which the workshop gives us is a parametrism outlook to Indian temples, which we have never seen. I mean, we have always explored or understood in a way that iska this belongs to Lord Ram or Shiva or the Yoni and
Right, right,
that's also. But when it comes to talking about taking into a next level, we've never thought about it. We always kept it to history and the ancient history, or and always been proud of that. But
right.
taking it to a next level with something this workshop does is really a great step, and I'm just looking forward to experimenting those stuff.
Yeah, yeah, great. Yeah, it's most of the time we look at it. Sometimes the semiological or the iconographic interpretation is the only interpretation that's there in the discourse,
Yeah,
and I guess
we
with
always
Joy's
sorry.
expertise here, we are. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. No.
No, so we always think about it that that they are the ones who have always been into the pedestal, and we cannot do or we cannot replicate them. But it is like that we need to transform that thing, which is that I think that workshop will actually try to do it, and maybe we achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Right.
that is it.
Great.
Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for being with us, Rishabh. And Sonali is the person next to Rishabh that I see.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonali and I'm based in Singapore and I'm a conservation architect by profession. So I'm working on some research and of course I'm very much interested into this program because of the new technologies that we are exploring and Also, I am very much curious to look at what is the what is going to be the scope for a digital heritage or a digital, if
Right.
we are talking about anything old, anything, it can be like anything literally. So
Yeah.
what is going to be the digital scope for it? We talk about various softwares. How is Rhino going to help us in this? I'm very much
Mm.
interested in this part of
Yeah.
scope. So maybe
Yeah.
later
It's
on we'll,
yeah.
yeah,
You bring a whole different dimension to which I guess connects this workshop along with its subjects and its techniques to the situation today, because I guess what we have understood, those of who have been lucky to have an internet connection and have the privilege of doing this workshop from our home, we have all understood that in given this pandemic situation, things are going to go digital whether we like it or not.
yeah,
And classrooms have moved on to Zoom boxes, and lectures, seminars. I have had conferences, they have moved online. And the question of heritage also becomes really important here, because digital heritage has been there. And I know a professor whom I met in, I think, University of Nottingham, who is one of the, I will try to share the uh, his works with you, who basically scans, makes 3D scans of historic structures and puts them in
yeah,
a global digital database. But
yeah,
it can Rhino add more to it and articulate those understandings even further. And that's a tremendously powerful research question. And I
yes,
mean, definitely beyond the scope of this workshop at present. But it's a really interesting research question that we would be glad if you explore it further and stay in
yeah,
touch and let us know how you are thinking about that question. But I am thankful that you brought that question into this discussion.
yes.
Okay. So
Thank
from
you.
Sonali, I have next to Sonali, I have Azar. Azar, would you like to talk
Yeah,
about?
yeah. Of course. So hello everyone. My name is Azhar, and I'm from Shimla. So I'm completing my quarantine time here in Shimla since I came
Okay.
back from Tokyo. So in
Okay.
Tokyo, I was working for Shigeruban Architects, and due to the
Okay.
outbreak, I decided to come back and stay for a couple of days, for a couple of months actually, and let this virus stay calm and settle down. So
Mhm.
and also I knew Joyce ever since university because I had his workshop in NASA when I was in first year back in 2013. So he somehow acted like a catalyst um, from where I initiated to Rhino and Grasshopper. So I've been doing it since 2013, and I wanted to encapsulate all those memories and all that experience again. So I decided that I'm going to learn again from Joyce and be a part of this workshop. So coming back to the architectural perspective of it, I just wanted to learn from history. Like that's what I believe. We should learn from history and then execute it according to scenarios. So what if we learn about temples and spiritual places, from the past, how it used to be, and how can we execute it uh, according to current situation using all those tools and technology and make the most of what we have in our hand right now. So that was the reason. And also, during this quarantine time, couldn't have been better to learn something, again, and it would be great. So this was the reason.
Right. So I guess Joy sir has a former student here. So
Yeah.
Yes, I remember Azhar from the
Okay.
workshop that you mentioned, and
Yeah. In Hyderabad, I think.
yes, and I've sort of intermittently kept track of what he's been up to, and he's gone on to win a couple of awards afterwards with his thesis, and I guess a couple of other projects. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so
And
much.
yeah, hopefully uh, we keep seeing each other for years to come. Yeah,
Of course, no doubt about it.
yeah. So whom do you see
cool.
on your screen next to Azhar?
We see Nitish Kumar. Okay.
Uh,
Uh, Nitish, we can't hear you.
Hello, am I
Yeah, yeah.
audible? Yeah, I am from
Yeah, yeah.
Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh, in kind of a spiritual capital for our state. I am an architecture student from fourth year. I'm currently doing my thesis on the temple, contemporary temple. So I am most interested in how the form evaluated in the history, so that if I know the rules, then I can break something, get my own form.
Yeah.
Today's class I learned scale, scale which
Um,
evolves from
uh,
Yeah.
our
Nitesh, we're really
Yeah.
sorry we couldn't make head or tail of what you just spoke because there seems to be an audio problem.
yeah, okay.
I
No,
heard
but
key phrases, which is your research is related to Indian temples. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
my thesis is not research. I'm doing
Okay.
a contemporary temple, Indian temple. So this involves history part also. So I'm learning more about the form evolution from workshop. That's what I'm.
Right, right. So,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
So, the little I understood from the broken audio is that your thesis is related to the topic, loosely related to the topic, and you're interested in sort of understanding how you can formally express temple geometries and then probably connect that to your thesis, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Cool. Awesome. Kush Parikh.
Hello. So
Hi.
I'm the recent architecture graduate from Surat. Right now, I'm pursuing a research fellowship on kind of researching about traditional Indian architecture and comparing or analyzing it with the modern practice and what is the future of that. So basically, I'm specifically doing it for residential architecture. It is a research fellowship with the Oro University in Surat.
Okay. Great to have you here, Kush. And we would look forward to your inputs through the next couple of days because I guess from now on we will go more collaborative and discussion oriented
Sure.
form of the workshop than broadcast oriented. So I guess we would learn from each other. Abdul Wajid,
Yes,
are
yes.
you? Yeah, go. Okay.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Abdul and I'm from Delhi. I've recently graduated from Jamia Millia Islamia and I'm currently working with RATLab. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, I'm a computational designer. So I've chosen this workshop because I've been very intrigued by the shape grammar of this ancient architecture because they basically revealed or basically evolved from basic geometrical shapes. So I wanted to understand what is behind that basic shape and how it is evolving from a basic square or a circle. So this was the main reason I chosen this workshop. And as I've told you that I've recently joined RadLab, so it will be very much helpful for me to understand the basic yeah, how the form basically evolves from geometries. So that's why, and I'm very grateful that I've been a part of this workshop and you guys
Yeah.
made me understood some basic principles of it.
You're
Great to
so
have
that's
you
kind.
here. Yeah, go
Would
ahead.
you happen to know Deepesh from Jamia? He's a very dear friend of ours. Deepesh, what's his
Yes,
surname? Samtani?
Yeah.
Deepesh Sangnani.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He is our
yeah.
senior,
Hmm.
2 years from
Deepesh and
ahead from us.
Hamza,
Yeah.
both of them are
Yes, yes.
dear friends.
Today only I have talked to Deep Bhai and he told that I I know Joy sir and Soumya sir. So
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
yeah,
Great. It's a small world and great to see
yeah,
connections.
of course.
So I hope you stick with us, Abdul, and do something interesting with
Yeah,
Indian
yeah.
temples. And
Yes, for sure.
all right. So yeah, moving on to Shudipto.
Hello. So I'm Sudipto. I'm from Bangladesh and I'm a third year student of architecture. And so there's a book called Joshua Kulna Itihas by Satish Chandra Mitra. In that book, the writer tried to describe the history of these places from geographical aspect, and he mentioned some of architecture there. And I am trying to rewrite the history on the architecture aspect. And so most of the architecture are like temples. So from there, this workshop was a made interest for me. So I'm here. Well,
Okay, that's really interesting. Shudipto, please, if you would kindly take the time to share the article that you mentioned with us,
yeah,
I'd be very much interested to learn more about it.
sure.
I understood that you are trying to reinterpret or introduce a new angle to the narrative in the history of it's a place-based history that you are trying to find a
Right.
different architectural aspect, and that sounds like a very interesting project. And being a student of architectural history, I would be very much keen to know how that unfolds for you. Uh, so next to Shudipto, there is Deng. If we are, I hope we are not moving too fast or too slow. I guess we are okay. We have covered quite a number of people. So Deng, are you here with us? I guess not. All right, then we have Keyur Ambavane, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. All right, yeah.
Yeah, hi, hello.
Hi.
Yeah, so I'm Keyur from Mumbai and I'm in fourth year of architecture studying in Kamla Raheja, College of
Mhm.
Juhu. And yeah, I'm in fourth year and I really wanted to explore rhino and grasshopper. Like I had done some basic course in my college, but never explored through Indian temples and how it would actually go further. So this is my keen interest for like applying for this workshop, and I find it quite interesting as I
Mhm.
yeah it's kind of interesting like having like seeing Indian temples in a very different perspective or in a very different angle that we never thought of. So that drives me towards this workshop, and I'm very thank you to.
Okay, cool. I visited Krivya Kamla Raja once in, I guess, 2016 for a workshop. It was an urban design workshop, and we were going from SPA to Krivya. So yeah, great to see you here, Keur. So I guess we do not have Deng with us right now, or do we have Shushmita with us? Yeah. Um, okay, so do we have Xiang? Hmm. All right. Yafen, Lee, uh, no.
Okay, okay.
Oh,
Can you
hi.
hear me?
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
yeah, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, hello everyone. I came from China and I'm an architecture student in China. And the reason that I take part in the project is that I'm a little interested in the Indian culture, and I'm so curious about how to combine with the digital fabrication or the digital design with the traditional Indian architecture, just like the Indian temple. So here I am. Yeah. And the other reason
Okay.
is and the other reason is I think some projects in the introduction file, just like the transit heart, the project. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
is and the transition heart in the introduction file, and I think it is interesting project, and I think yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for being with us here. And this is great that we are having such a diverse crowd all interested in our workshop. It's a big honor to us. And so I would just like to know if Xiang Yu is here with us or Shushmita Bishash is here with us, or else we could move to Hawei Zhang. And I'm really sorry if I'm butchering the name. Hawei, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
But I think there is something wrong with my camera. I'm so sorry.
But we can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
I'm from China, although it's deep night in China, but I'm not sleepy because I'm totally attracted to this class. I'm during my first year in my bachelor study, and I major in architecture. I chose this program because I'm really curious about how to combine parametricism with Indian temples. During my bachelor study, I mainly researched two things. One is parametricism, and another is religious architecture. But I have never imagined how to combine the two. During the study, I really feel amazed. How can you build this strong relationship between modern technology and ancient culture? So I feel it's cool. As for what I'm expecting, I'm pretty interested in Indian culture, so I want to know more stories and histories behind the Indian temple. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for being with us, Hawei. So I guess what I am also realizing, where do we have? Yeah, we have a few couple more people to go, I guess. Is Nana LYU with us? Are you with us, Nana?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
Can you hear
hi.
me?
Yes, I can
Oh,
hear you.
hello, everyone. I'm a
Nana,
Chinese.
is your video on? We are only seeing a outer
Yeah.
space diagram. Okay.
Oh,
Never
sorry.
mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I guess my
I
something
think you
mistake.
have the background, the virtual background on it. Yeah. Anyway, go
Oh,
ahead,
I'm
please.
sorry. Okay, I'm an architecture student from China and currently in my second year of graduate studies at Masada University in Japan, and I live in Tokyo too. I'm researching the history of traditional Japanese wooden structures, including the evolution of some styles and some, techniques of the construction. Thanks for the tutors lectures, which help me understand the development of Indian temples and the geometry, the parametric design. And I hope to, one day analyze traditional Japanese architecture in the same way. Although there are so many differences between Japanese shrines we call Jinja and the Indian temples. There are so many differences, such as one is tectonics and one is stereotomics. But well, I hope one day I can analyze them in this
Yeah,
way.
I mean, and that's really both an inspiring way of looking at this workshop, that you think if this workshop enables you to do that, we would be really honored. And of course, and please make sure that you stay in touch with us and all of us here, and let us know what you do in future with Japanese temples and what are the internal geometric logics in traditional Japanese architecture, and if parametric way of looking at it can give us a new angle, that would be excellent. Yafen Lee, are you with us? People shifted in my screen, and so I'm like, all right. Yafen, Oh, okay. We already got through you, so I was not sure. Hawaii, we got Hawaii. We have Zuizi. Am I pronouncing it right? Zuizi Wang.
Hello, everyone. I'm a student in China, but not in architecture. Now I major in Chinese literature, but I have so much interest in architecture. So I wish I could study in architecture in graduate school. And the reason I joined this workshop is that I think the temple is a mysterious shape of architecture. And sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
No problem, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, great. It's I did not, and it's so nice to have someone from literature joining us, because I thought we would go trans global, but it's great to go transdisciplinary. And I think your perspective would be highly important, because we have a part in which we are talking about the narrative, right? We're talking about not only the shape, but what the shape means. And I have colleagues here in United States who come from all walks of life, and especially from literature, contributing into architecture and helping each other. So the future is totally interdisciplinary. So it's great to have you here with us. We have gone through most of them here. Tang, are you with us? You have a, I don't know.
We also have Shrishti Bagri,
Hello?
with whom we haven't
Hello.
spoken.
You hear?
Right. Okay.
Han Junhui.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Tang.
Uh, Hello everyone. I'm studying in architecture and I come from Guangdong, China. And now I was studying Hebei University of Technology, and this year I have get my bachelor degree. And I plan to study for a master degree in Germany in the future. I chose this workshop because I'm very interested in the Indian temple and also the Indian traditional culture. And also I have been to India for travel in 2014.
Did you visit any temples in particular that you
Yes, of
remember?
course. Taj Mahal in Agra. And also because Taj Mahal is the most famous temple in India.
I hate to interrupt you, Tang. Taj Mahal is known as a mausoleum mostly, but I am glad that you visited it. It's temples are usually, we understand temples with the Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist, and also the Parsi tradition. But it's great. Of course, Taj Mahal is definitely very important.
Also, I have also visited other Hindu temple, but I forgot their name. Sorry.
No
And
problem.
also
No problem.
there are also a famous temple called maybe Lotus Temple in New Delhi.
Yeah, the Baha'i temple in Delhi. Yes.
Yeah, Baha'i temple.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a more modern form with a shell structure, and definitely that's a very interesting space to be in. We have, if there is anyone left who would like to introduce themselves as we go through, and
we haven't spoken to Deng.
we haven't spoken to Den, but Deng is
want to
Deng
show
is
you
here with us.
something.
Can you hear me?
Can?
Yeah.
All right. Yes.
Hello everyone. And after graduating from school, I'm working in China. And I'm working in the Anhui province, architecture design and research. And during school and the work process, I always maintain strong interest in the parameters in the
Right.
programming.
Yeah. And one design process, I always use one Rhino and Grasshopper. So and also I I very like Indian movie, the Indian book.
Okay.
And so I joined this because India is a country with a long history. Through this course, I get
Mm.
a little level.
All right. Your uh, last part of your we didn't hear you for the last bit, but I guess what you said that you're very much interested in coding and parametric design, and also you like Indian movies. I guess
Yes,
was one
yes.
part of it. All right, great to have you. Joy, do you want?
Yeah,
Did
wait.
you?
Stephanie wanted to show us something.
Yeah, I want to show you something. This is a book of Peruvian cultures, and some designer of graphic designer made this mandala with our culture. So here I have a lot of mandalas with our iconography and geometry, and maybe I want to explore some of these with that technique of you can see.
Oh yes, yes,
Right.
of course. So I mean, you got to pick the circle as your primary shape, and also along with this, you may look into spirographs, which are, you have a larger circle and you take a smaller circle and you run a pen through it and you start generating shape.
Like
Those are called spirographs.
Spirorat. I think Spirorat by
Yeah,
RatLab.
that's the plugin.
It's a plugin, okay.
Yes, yes, you could look at that, and probably that could also be of help to you.
Right.
We
I
have-
guess we have only a couple of people left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we speak to Yiming?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Yiming Liu. I'm from China. I will study in London in this year. I chose this workshop because I have a huge interest about Indian culture. I want to know something about how can we build a connection between Indian temple and how can we use it in the future? How can we use this element? So I choose this workshop.
Great. Great to have you with us, Yiming. And do we have Xiang? I guess Xiang, and we have a couple of others left, I guess.
Yeah.
Xiang, can you listen to us? Can you hear us? Okay.
Are you referring to me?
Not sure. I have.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, let's speak to Zing.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Let me share the video. Hi everyone. My name is Xing. I'm from Singapore, and currently I'm studying at Rice University in Houston. I'm studying architecture. So I took this workshop because I'm very interested in learning more of Grasshopper. I did a bit of Grasshopper in school, and I also wanted to learn about like non-European styles of architecture. So a lot of Rice's curriculum focus on European architecture, which is interesting to learn about too. But I want to learn about architecture from cultures outside of Western cultures. And I think this workshop was really interesting in that it's using like parametric design, like kind of what we are kind of like digital means to understand the past. So I think so. That's why I took up the workshop, and I'm very grateful to have taken out the workshop. I think what I've learned so far is really great, and I look forward to the next few days as well.
Great, great to have you here. And I think it's a very important comment that you made, because I myself have been working as in teaching architectural history courses here at the University of Illinois. And it is not only specific to architectural history, but by and large history has been mostly covering in the Anglophone world, in the English speaking world. History has been having more coverage of Western examples than of the non-Western ones. And that has got a lot to do with the socio-political economic history over the last 100 and 150 years. There's been tremendous amount of research, the post-colonial angle to it and critique of it. But one good way of working through it is to look at the non-Western example, and that's a very important point. And I think whether you belong to the West or whether you belong to the non-West is not the question. The question is to appreciate the fact that there is always a world of unknown and explore it as much as you can, right? So I think and I totally understand your point about how architectural history especially in the United States is mostly taught through a Eurocentric and West-centered perspective, probably because the United States is invested in the West more than it is in the East or the non-West. But at the same time, in a global discourse of architectural history, we must at least make an effort to make sure that we look at all the examples as exhaustively as we can. So yeah, thank you for joining us, Zing. And I guess Ziyang are you here with us? Ziyang, you need to unmute yourself.
It's me. So,
Yes.
sorry, I missed.
Yeah, did I pronounce your name incorrectly? I'm so sorry.
Hello, everyone. I missed the opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Xiang Yu. I'm from China. I study in Dalian University of Technology, and I major in architecture. I'm an undergraduate. In our school, there are many parametric courses, and we have learned some knowledge about traditional architecture, including Indian temples, but just a little. But we have never connected the two things together. So I think this workshop is a new try for us all. So I chose the workshop, and I'm looking forward to the following courses in our workshop. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I think we have only 2 people left here to introduce. Please let me know if I have missed anyone. Are you guys here with us? Srishti.
Yeah,
Hello.
Srishti.
Yeah.
Hello. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. My name is Srishti. I'm a fourth year architecture student from Delhi. So I was introduced to Rhino and Grasshopper 3 months ago during my internship. I've been trying out certain products like lamps and various other furniture since then. I've been also trying out various plugins of Grasshopper, and I've been trying out other coding languages as well since I'm really fascinated by it. And I found this workshop really fascinating because it never occurred to me that parametricism had been used in temple architecture as well. So I was thinking to use some way of parametricism in my dissertation topic next year. And I'm very grateful to you, sir, for this workshop.
Great, awesome. Thanks to have you. Thanks for being here with us, Srishti. And if anyone is left, please go ahead and introduce
Is
yourself.
Shushmita with us? I know her personally. She happens to be from Bangladesh. I don't know if she's with us. I suppose not. We'll go to the second screen. Did we speak to Prashant?
I think no.
Yes, yes,
We-
you speak.
Okay.
Oh. We
And
have a message in the chat of Yifei Sang.
Okay, yeah, someone put in a.
Hi, hi, and
Hi.
I'm Afei Zhang.
Yeah,
And
Go ahead.
I just came from the YouTube live stream and I missed the self-introduction. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. My name is Afei Zhang and I came from China and I just graduated from the Qingdao University of Technology and I will go into the Sheffield School of University in England to finish my further study. And I'm very interested in Indian culture, so I chose this workshop and I'd like to find more things with you and thank you.
Great, great, awesome. All the best for your future education, Ify.
Thank you.
And do we have anyone left? Do we have Prashant or Sushmita with us, or else we can guess walk towards the concluding. All right. So I would say it's a great pleasure to meet you all, and please keep in touch and stay in touch with each other. Discuss your ideas. I guess this Joy, they have a common email group to interact with each other, right? And also they can connect through Zoom, I guess.
no, there is no common email group at the
Okay.
moment. What I'm going to do is towards the end of the workshop, sort of collate the email addresses of the ones
Right.
of us who are still with us, because I mean that sort of trickles out the serious ones from the not so serious ones. So you only get a consolidated list of people who would probably be willing to be in correspondence with you instead of having the whole list of addresses. I'll just briefly speak about what we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to touch upon various column geometries, not just the straightforward sweep ones, but varying the profile of the sweep rail and then figuring out different ways of generating various column shapes. And secondly, similar to what we did yesterday with mandapas, there's a particular temple in West Bengal called the Dakshineshwar temple, wherein if you Google the image, you'll start noticing that there's one structure placed on top of the other, which is the repetition of the one below it, but scaled down. So you can start repeating them. And similar to our mandapa exercise, you can have a slider to control the number of repetitions and the amount of scaling, and then suddenly from using the same logic, the typology which is used for temples could also be kind of arguably used for a tower structure. So we kind of extract the geometric logic from that particular temple and try and see how it may go vertically upwards or horizontally and laterally to one side. We're going to do those two exercises. And you've seen the four basic shapes. Kind of have a think within yourself which one you want to pick and what you want to do with it. We'll formally start with it the day after. I'll most probably share the format of the output. It'll just be an A2 sheet in InDesign, or maybe I'm going to share it at the end of day tomorrow or the beginning of the day the next on day 5. So yeah, so if you could Shomo summarize your presentation and then
Yeah,
I guess we could ready to conclude for the day.
just remember the basics that will be useful for the workshop exercise that Joy will begin tomorrow, that there are 4 basic plan forms, and we are mostly interested in you interpreting those planforms and making, you know, a superstructure. The kind of example I saw that Joy was, you know, working with you in the workshop, the day one, where you used a few square forms, circular forms, combinations of them, and then expanded it to a spire. Now, the most important part that we should not miss between the basic platform and the iterations through the Rhino and Grasshopper platform is a rationale or a narrative that why you are doing what you are doing, right? It shouldn't. I mean, feel free to imagine, but it's not like running a code and do seeing what comes out, but rather through what I discussed today, the different aspects of Indian temple geometries, and also shared some links with you, which I would love if you explore. And if you are at home, you know, there are a few 40 minutes long lectures by Adam Hardy, which you would be very useful for you to look at in his YouTube channel. And then you find some ideas which talks not only geometrically, but also has a meaning to it, that why we are doing this. If you want to contextualize, connect it with your research interest. People talked about digital heritage. People talked about researching different kinds of temple geometries, other contexts, and interests in forms and form making. Whatever your interest is, if you want to connect it to that, if you have a fresh idea, if you just want to reinterpret, you know, one of the temples examples that you saw, that is also fine with us. We are mostly interested in your we are trying to understand how this tool, which is of the present, which is parametric design digital platform, help us understand things from quote unquote history and reinterpret them and use them, and not only read them as static images and sections and plan diagrams, but read the internal geometric milieu of it. And that is the all the clue I'm going to give you. And you have 1 A2 sheets. We're all creative designers, literary scholars, and all of you to, you know, imagine on that canvas with 3 constraints. One is the shape itself. You choose it: circle, square, rectangle, upside. Then of course we have to use Rhino and Grasshopper, and then the constraint of the A2 sheet as well. So and that's about it, I guess. And I guess Joy will give you we will both provide you with a template so that we have a coherent presentation for everyone, which I guess we will try to talk with the digital workshop guys, and we will make it available digitally later on after the workshop concludes, so that you can use it for, you know, wherever you're going. If you want to take this with you, that would be great. Or if you want to keep it with yourself, that's also fine. Is that okay, Joy? Is that I think it's...
Yeah, that's about it. So
Yeah.
as you mentioned,
Yeah.
probably watch the videos and start thinking about how you want to work with one of those 4 geometries and interpret it in a manner which is not only geometrically interesting but also makes sense to the larger narrative of architecture and society, and how is that relevant to today's time. So I guess that's about it. I mean, we're going to pick up tomorrow at the same time, and we're going to have a couple of... Yes, Stephanie?
I have a request.
Yeah.
I am not the best in English, so I want to if you can write all that you say now about the exercise, if you can write it and send to email, because you talk about the exercise, but I miss some parts because I am not very good in English.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it.
Which language would you prefer?
I
No,
talk
I think what she's
Spanish
asking is just a written form.
Okay.
about you
I think.
talk of exercise. A little resume, I think.
Oh, understood. Okay.
All right. Yeah, we
Yeah,
will.
like
We
a brief.
will.
Yeah, of course we'll
Like
do
a
that.
brief. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So I
all
guess
right.
that's about it for tonight. We're going to start
Yeah.
in about 21 hours time from now. So have a good day, guys.
Yeah. Good night and great meeting you all. So all the best.